By now you have watched at least once and maybe memorized from front to back my introduction to giving a persuasive essay. So this is a follow-up lesson on some basic tips, some things to remember now that you've been working on or have prepared and submitted and maybe even received some feedback on your outline for this type of presentation. So this is now our third presentation, our second with a formal approach. And so we want to be bumping up the bar, improving each time. And in this case, we want to do some very specific things. There are various ways that you can go about doing these things, but there are certain things that we want to accomplish in a persuasive presentation. So I'm going to go over those and provide some tips and ideas on how you can be most effective in persuading your audience to come around to your position. So hopefully you have used the topical approach to your outline, and so this is going to look very familiar to you, but basically you want to organize, for our purposes, your persuasive presentation this way. You want to state the purpose. Why are we here? What are you wanting to do with your audience in your 5 to 7 minutes? What's your thesis or proposition? What is it that you want them to agree with you about? What position are you taking? And here's where you need to be really clear and complete in what you are trying to convince your audience about. A basic sort of general idea isn't going to be good enough. Then you want to transition to your main points to make your argument, to make your case, and then you're going to finish with a strong conclusion that goes beyond just repeating your thesis, but I'll talk about this in a moment. You want to call your audience to some kind of action. What do you want them to do with what you just told them? So the purpose is not the same as the thesis. The purpose is essentially telling your audience, here's why you're here. Here's why I'm speaking to you today. And you want to essentially put yourself in the right place with regard to your audience. Here's what I'm doing, here's my purpose for being here, here's your purpose for being here, here's what we're about to do. This can be one sentence, it can be a story, it can be anything that you think is going to bring your audience into the place that you want them to be. So an important part of accomplishing that, stating your purpose, is to introduce your topic. We're not quite at the thesis stage yet, but here's where you have an opportunity to tell a story or to what some people like to call create your hook. Bring your audience with you the next step. So oftentimes it can be an astonishing bit of statistical data. It can be a story, one that you know or one that you've read, one that's part of research you've done, but something that engages your audience and causes them to want to stay with you as you now go into the meat of your presentation. And now we get to the thesis or proposition, for another term, and this is where you make your full statement of here's my position and here's where I want you to be with me by the time I'm done here in another 5 minutes or so. So you are being specific, you're being complete, and you're being concise all at the same time. This is usually done in no more than 1 or 2 sentences, but these need to be really carefully thought through so they go beyond just a basic statement into a whole thesis or proposition. And I've got other lessons on what that means, so be sure to be familiar with and refer to your textbook. What is a thesis statement and how does it apply to this specific assignment? Once you've done that, you're now into the meat, the body of your presentation, and here's where you want to deliver your key supporting facts. So you want to be using your research, and you're going to refer to it specifically according to Dr. Jim Johnson at the University of Southern California's research on that kind of thing. And here's where you can apply as many of the Greek approaches to persuasion as you have time for or as makes sense for you in your specific presentation. So logos, pathos, ethos, and sometimes kairos. I have a whole other presentation on the Aristotelian approach to making your persuasive case, but here's where you apply those techniques to help bring your audience in and make your convincing argument. Once that's all done, you need to finish by making a strong case. And that means you're doing more than just repeating your start. You're doing more than just repeating your thesis. Now you are reminding your audience of your thesis, but now you are, generally speaking, you're making a call to action. What is it you want them to do now? It may just be to agree with you, but it may be a more obvious call to action. What do you want them actually to do with the argument you've made on the assumption that you've made your case? At the very least, you want to, it's sort of if you were in a courtroom, you're making your final summation to the jury, your final arguments to the jury, and you're going to end with, my client is guilty or innocent, and here's why. As you're doing all of this, keep three basic ideas, three keys in mind. One, good organization, going from one thing to the next, good transitions. You've got your strong start, your way to bring your audience into the topic with you. You've got a clear and strong thesis statement. You've used techniques to humanize your presentation, to keep your audience with you or draw your audience in with you. And you're starting now to use the vocal techniques that we have begun talking about. You're using tone, you're using speed, you're using volume. All of these things that will help you go from just reading what you have on a piece of paper to delivering a real presentation. Again, I think one of the things that a lot of students are afraid of is that they want to read this because they're afraid of making any mistakes. Mistakes are going to happen. Don't worry about mistakes. What you want to do is deliver your presentation person to person, and that means conveying your information effectively, completely, but it doesn't mean just reading the words on a page. We're going beyond that now into being a conveyor of information, human to human.